Hi and welcome everyone. Great to have you here. In today's session, we're breaking down the key findings of CFO Connect's Salary Benchmark Report for 2026. This is their flagship annual report now in its sixth year and a go-to resource for understanding finance compensation trends across Europe and beyond. The goal is simple, give you the insights and transparency on finance salary trends and the tools and data to get paid what you're worth. My name is Dav Masail. Today, I'm your moderator, and I'm the co-founder of Xander, an executive search firm located in London and New York, and we cover Europe as well as North America from our respective offices, placing people like yourselves, finance leaders, into early-stage technology companies that are looking to scale. Today, we're joined by two distinguished guests, Pauline Babel, from CFO from Spendesk, and Jessica Pillow, Global Head of Total Rewards from Deal. They'll go on to introduce themselves shortly. Just a quick overview of the agenda for today. We'll dive into the report very, very shortly in terms of getting the expert opinion from Pauline and Jessica on their perspective on the market and what they think of some of the kind of interesting findings from the report. So that will probably be around kind of 20-25 minutes, and then we'll take questions from the attendees today. So please populate the Q&A tab that you can see on your screens with any particular questions, and I'll gather them at the end of the Q&A session with Pauline and Jessica and fire further questions at them. So we're looking at 45 minutes to an hour to wrap up this session. So hopefully we'll keep you engaged for that entire period. So yeah, just in terms of the introduction. So Pauline, do you want to just do a quick introduction on yourself in terms of who you are and what you do, and the same with yourself, Jessica?
Sure. I start, Jessica. So hi, I'm Pauline Babel. I'm the CFO at Spendesk. I've been at Spendesk for 1 year now, and still I've been a CFO and a female leader for the past 9 years now. So very happy to be here with you because today I sit on both sides of the data we are about to share. I set compensation for my team. I participate in the salary compensation discussions in the company, and as a senior female finance leader, I've lived many of the trends this report surfaces. And I've been working in the SaaS and tech environment for now 6 years.
Excellent. Thank you, Pauline.
Amazing. Thanks for having me. I'm Jess Pillow. I head up Total Rewards at Deals. So even though I'm not directly on the finance team, I always like to look at myself as an extension of the finance team. So that's helping with, managing one of the biggest line items in all of your budgets, which is your headcount and human capital expense. Have been in the compensation space globally for about 20 years now, and so have really seen kind of the ebbs and flows of kind of what's happening on a global scale in the world. Excited to share these results. Again, this is our second year in a row we're doing this together, so yeah, can't wait.
Awesome. Well, what world of experience both of you bring to the table. So really excited to kind of dive into your insights and perspectives. So just in terms of the report itself, just to give you a bit of context there in terms of what it consists of. So over 500 finance professionals were surveyed anonymously and self-reported. The survey was open between January to March of 2026. So very recent findings, of course. So make it, the findings there make your discussions quite relevant, I suppose. Respondents are primarily CFO Connect community members, predominantly senior finance leaders in tech and SaaS-based companies in France, Germany, UK, and the US. So real mix of data points, if you like, and obviously there's certain nuances within each data sets and sub-trends, of course, that we'll kind of go into in terms of country differences and kind of gender differences and so on and so forth. So to begin with, keen to kind of get your thoughts and set the tone, if you like. So perhaps we can get the poll up now, Luke, and get people's kind of thoughts on what their kind of satisfaction, overall kind of satisfaction feel is. So we're just going to bring that up shortly. Hopefully you can, I'm not sure if that's up yet or...
I think this is always one of our favorite questions in engagement surveys. So
absolutely. I'm not sure if we've been able to see it yet, or perhaps we're having a few technical... There we are. Here we go. Okay, so I think I'm underpaid. Okay, 64%. So that's probably in line with what the survey discovered as well. But it's going up and down like a true poll. So yeah, 60%, 55%. Yeah. So there's quite a bit of discontent there.
yeah.
Underpaid being the majority, and roughly in line, kind of, thereabouts. So we can dive into that later on, but it's really interesting to kind of get your overall, as a kind of satisfaction feel, and it's not too dissimilar to what a lot of others are thinking right now. So yeah, so I suppose the first section of the report looks at the finance pay paradox. And here we are, beautiful kind of visual in front of us just to make sense of it. Overall salaries are up, but kind of CFO pay has kind of fallen off. Average finance salary rose by 4% to 125,000 euros. That is recovery after the 6% drop in 2025, of course. CFO salaries fell by 4% to 152,000 euros, the first ever decline. Finance director salaries increased by 10%, controller up by 7%, VP of finance down by 16% as the biggest loser. And kind of geography gap. The same CFO role in London is at 199,000 euros versus Paris at 115,000 euros, which is very significant, of course, at 84,000 euro difference. So yeah, that's, those are some of the kind of interesting data points that we can see in front of us right now. Paulie, I'm going to go to you straight away just to gauge your opinion on that. What do you think CFO salary? Why do you think, I suppose, CFO salaries are declining while the broader market kind of recovers? And is this a sign of, I suppose, changing expectations at the top, or something structural?
The way I see it is, I as a finance director for the past 9 years now, I think that between 2020 and 2024, the CFO salaries, all the finance salaries, especially in tech and SaaS, were literally pulled up by a kind of a hiring frenzy driven by cheap capital. And I think that companies were competing to get the best talents very, very quickly. I think that era is a bit over, and now we are observing a bit of a correction. But I think that looking at salaries for CFOs, it may be not it's not a complete angle, because so many CFOs are now looking also for a package, including equity. But maybe Jessica, you share some insight on that. The way I see it is like, the bar has risen too. So what was asked to a CFO even 5 years ago and pre-AI, it's not the same as of today. We are expecting to be so much more in the center of the, chief value officers almost. And I think it can come as seen in the poll, as a bit of a frustration to get stuck in the salary of a finance director, being asked to do so much more with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. There's and there's obviously, as mentioned earlier, sub trends within those particular figures in terms of probably US and UK are seeing some quite competitive salary packages right now as that tech space really takes on a new level with record levels of investment. But I know that Europe is slightly kind of lagging behind, which is possibly reflective of the lack of salary increases there over the last 12 months. Jessica, are companies restructuring how they pay at CFO level? Are you seeing that these are kind of shifting the mix towards variable comp, as Pauline alluded to, with that equity piece and bonus? What are your kind of overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I completely agree with Pauline in that we're starting to see a lot of right sizing happening, right? Like you saw this kind of true competition for talent, which tends to drive the price tag up, right? When you're competing, especially in such a small pool of people, right? When you look even globally at kind of that CFO or senior finance professional level. So yeah, I mean, we are seeing companies be a lot more cash conscious, and really kind of introducing those longer term retention levers that are tied to company performance, individual performance as well. Especially things that are very retentive, right? So I'm seeing a lot of focus on equity. Um, you know, uh, Reframing the equity vehicles that are offered, right? So it can be attractive to offer the option to a C suite level. Would you rather have RSUs versus stock options, as an example? Because there could be specific tax advantages for that particular person depending on their country. So companies are looking at these different levers to be able to kind of maximize and personalize for the person. I'm also seeing an increase in accelerated vesting schedules to really kind of drive retention, but to keep people at certain milestones, right? Especially the role of the CFO. You're joining to be able to drive long-term financial impact for the company. So dangling that carrot again in a way that is very retentive. I Again, like I would say, like the standard like bonus that you would see, I think still prevails in the like cash component. But I'm seeing more on the equity, like more creativity on the equity side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, there were some other stats as well, not just CFO kind of salaries were highlighted, but obviously VP of Finance and controller salaries, the former going up and the latter going down. I think what we've seen is that there's a lot of AI tools that are really infiltrating the finance space, which has kind of changed the role of the VP of Finance, and that's possibly brought the salary of those individuals down. Whereas, there's less AI tools or less trusted AI tools within the controller function, which is obviously, quite an important function to get right. Otherwise, you open yourself up to all sorts of fines. So, that CPA or CA or ACA type controller has really increased in demand, and therefore their salaries have gone up significantly, across the markets that we serve. Pauline, I don't know if you've kind of seen that as well, and I don't know if you've tried to hire a CA or a strong accountant recently, but how easy is it, and how have you seen that kind of evolve?
Well, the way I see it evolve, I think it's about the skills now that I'm looking for, and the skills I'm willing to pay for. Now, like recently, I hired a new head of finance operations, and what I'm expecting from him is like he foster AI adoption across the teams, and he's using Claude himself to increase the productivity of the team, accelerating our capacity to answer to auditors, to get answers in hours and not in days. And I'm willing to pay for that, and usually, so I'm willing to pay for better finance ops and controllers in general. This I think I will get productivity gains, so I'm ready to pay for a premium. Let's say I put it this way, right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question that's come in that is quite relevant to this particular topic of how does the size of the company, revenue, number of employees impact salary income. I think what we're seeing is that, post Series C, if you've got traction and good growth, the CFO salaries are being pretty competitive, because a lot of companies are now talking about public markets a lot more versus 12 to 18 months ago. We obviously saw SpaceX go public, a few days ago, which has really kind of stimulated the market. But I think at that level, salaries have been pretty competitive in the markets once again that we serve. And then kind of at earlier stage, as we'll see later on, companies have opted for that fractional kind of assistance, which is kind of the need for full-time CFOs at A, B is less so versus any other time. Jessica, I don't know if you've seen any similar trends to that.
Yeah, exactly. It all depends on the maturity and the stage of the organization, and then who they're seeing as their peers or competitors are. I think that doesn't just prove true today, but it proves true in the data that, depending on the size and maturity is going to help kind of guide and land where that work, really what the price tag that someone's willing to pay for that role.
Absolutely. Keen to go into the second section now, which is, widening divides. So the gender pay gap gets worse again. As the data points out here, women in finance earn 22% less than men on average in 2026, up from 19% in 2025, erasing much of kind of last year's progress. The CFO, as you say, the green line shows a 27% in 2024, 14% in 2025, and 8% in 2026, narrowed by 19 points in 2 years. Women are more content to stay in current roles. This may paradoxically be slowing wage progression at non-CFO levels, potentially. Interesting data, not where we want to be still, but it seems as though it's kind of moving in the right direction. Jessica, there's a particular area that you're driving at Deal. The EU Pay Transparency Directive is on the horizon, and are companies making genuine structural changes or largely preparing to comply on paper? What does that real change look like, would you say?
I think I'm living it. And if any of you talk to your HR teams and you're in any of the EU member states, we're all living it today. And have been preparing for this for years. I'll just start by saying, the 22% gap and then the reduction from last year is really disappointing. So the EU Pay Transparency Directive, is going to continue to highlight those gaps, is going to, force organizations to right-size those gaps and actually hold people accountable and companies accountable for, okay, well, how are you going to justify this gap? If not, you need to make plans to reduce it, right? And so it is something that a lot of companies are focused on. Even though this has been in the works since 2023 and it just went live this past Sunday, there's still a lot of unknowns. Anytime we see this type of regulatory legislation get pushed out, especially at this scale, a lot of teams are, still kind of not waiting and seeing what happens, but there's a lot of gaps and a lot of unknowns on how practically things will work. What I've seen is that, it's identifying those foundational gaps, not necessarily like if you had issues with pay parity between peers, this is just highlighting it. It's still a problem if you haven't fixed it. So it's still a problem, and companies right now are really focusing on making sure they have the right architecture, they have the right frameworks. And so it is important for finance leaders to partner with their HR or human capital teams to really understand, if we have these gaps, how can we afford to bridge them? If not, are we as a company prepared to kind of take that risk and, for potential claims and whatnot? So what I'm doing internally at Deal is, we've been prepping for this for years now. And so we're in a really good place, but those questions still prevail of, okay, well, we still have time to minimize those gaps. what are we doing about it? Maybe we're having to trade other areas where we wanted to push towards other total rewards programs. Maybe we have to backpedal on those because we need to make sure that we're compliant and that we're reducing those gaps.
Yeah. And Jessica, just in terms of the general kind of C-suite mix across the deal, is it more prevalent in certain areas? Is it quite prevalent in the finance space that there is that paradox as such, or is it kind of across the piece, would you say?
Yeah, it tends to be more prevalent in engineering and in so like tech and sales, right? Where you see more male dominated, industries, right? And so, the highlight here for especially for CFOs is, there's a lot more males dominating the CFO space than females, right? And so even though the number of people outweigh one another, it's minimizing that gap to regardless. So
Yeah, understood. And Pauline, as a female finance leader, what I suppose responsibility do finance leaders have in making this data more visible and actionable inside their organizations? And how have you kind of gone about that, would you say?
Yeah, so I would just start with something like I'm following like the CFO of OpenAI, and she's a female leader, right? And she's quite inspiring. So I think that now we have like models, female models rising, especially in the US. It's pretty inspiring. This aside, I think that for sure we have a responsibility as a CFO myself and as a female leader who's been suffering from that as well. Finance sits at the intersection of every salary decision in the company during media review, during the salary grids we are designing for our hirings. We see payroll, we model the headcount planning, we approve the comp bands. So we can surface the gap, and we should act for it like in a very proactive way. I think we're the one designing the budget for annual increase, and I think it's a must-have to ring-fence a portion of that to fund all the initiatives that Jessica was mentioning, and it must be, let's say, factored in the budget. It cannot come as a top, as a by the way, we've got this new regulation and we have to do something with the female contributors. I think we should embed that in our standard budget, and I think that making pay equity a standing item of the compensation review. I think that I'm not surprised working in a fintech that's like male are dominating the tops, but they are like those are maybe even after school we have more male engineering, and maybe females are more silent or not taking the risk. But we can actively normalize it and put it in the conversations of mid-year, and again make a dedicated budget if we have some gaps to close, short term and mid-term.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting from our perspective. We are getting a lot more pushback from clients who want to see more female leaders in the shortlist, especially for CFO mandates. But we struggle because there's just not many female CFOs out there. I think at the controller level and kind of at a certain kind of mid-manager level, we are able to put together a shortlist which is quite balanced. And then when we go out to the market, we struggle to really identify CFOs who are female leaders, and it's the most frustrating thing because there is some good talent out there, but I think it's working at that kind of grassroots level of why is that happening and how can we encourage women to keep progressing, but also get companies to change their mindset and their certain kind of I suppose ways of doing things, which obviously this directive is hoping will do and will impact that figure. But it's super frustrating and disappointing, as you said, Jessica, to see those figures as they are. But hopefully this directive and people like yourself, Pauline, will really champion female leaders more so, and we'll see a lot more CFOs that are female in the next report in 2027. Going on to the kind of next part of the report, the kind of dissatisfaction, pretty kind of high figure there. 55% would consider a new role. First time ever above 50%. chart shows kind of a real rise, 43% in 2024, 2025, 49% and 55% this year. Top reason to move has shifted, new challenge, 30% now beats higher salary of 26%. First time in the kind of survey's history. And most restless, head of accounting, only 14% plan to stay, and CFOs and heads of finance most likely to remain. So yeah, Pauline, coming to you on that. What are you hearing from your own teams, and what signals should leaders be watching out for with this particular kind of data sets as such?
Well, I'm super careful about what I'm hearing and what I'm not hearing, by the way, because I think that my enemy today is the quiet quitting, and it's not that obvious to identify it. So I think that I'm like watching carefully for disengagement before the resignation. I think this is the leading indicators we have to watch carefully. And to me, the signals I'm super vigilant to are like someone stop volunteering for projects, especially during this AI like frenzy. The question in team meetings getting quiet. They stop pushing back on things that are pretty, yeah, they care about. So this quiet quitting, I'm super vigilant to, and I think that the way we can like linking with the compensation frustration we are feeling, I think that's a way to retain might be to also speak a bit more about career path and compensation discussion, just on the table, nothing in the back, with I think it's at least this is my humble approach to make sure that I have a healthy turnover in the team, but not people just getting frustrating and resigning without even me getting the opportunity to retain them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jessica, I suppose what is driving the shift away from salary as the kind of primary reason to move, would you say? And is it that salaries have improved enough, or that factors matter more now? What are your thoughts around that?
I mean, it's probably definitely not salaries have improved enough by way of the data, but no, I think it's a couple of different things. And at Deal, we also published a global workforce study. And so I think if you look at, you've got a number of different generational groups that are really kind of dominating the workforce now, where it's kind of okay to move around. And so I think people are just not shy about that, especially if one of the top reasons that we're seeing is kind of like, I want that new challenge. Maybe I'm going to go somewhere else to get that new challenge versus staying at my same organization for 10 plus years. So I think it's a combination of that, and then on the generational type as well, it's like you've got different things are important to different people depending on their stage of life, right? And I think that really plays into kind of where we're seeing people shift and move around. And like back to Pauline's point, it's really understanding what is important to your talent that you currently have, right? And kind of tailoring compensation or other programs or projects to that person. I was actually, when you all sent me the results over, I was kind of laughing at the heads of accounting stat, because we, again, also just published a report that there are 2 dying professions in the world. One of them is payroll and the other is accounting. You're not seeing a ton of people go to school to say, I want to grow up to be an accountant like we used to, 10 years ago. And so that resource is starting to become more scarce. And what happens when people start to leave? That pressure gets put on the people that are there and usually are your top of the house. And so, coupled with that pressure and maybe not as much movement in compensation and just kind of wanting to do something different. I think that plays quite a bit into that dissatisfaction.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the head of accounting is an interesting one. I think,
Yeah.
as I pointed out at the kind of early onset, I think there's a lot more kind of exciting controller opportunities out there that are paying super high because of the talent short market. So a lot of these CPAs, CAs, ACAs are getting their heads are being turned by super high salaries. We placed controllers in the US last 3 roles at 300K.
Mm-hmm.
One was
Not
at 280, one 290, and that's similar salary to a CFO in a lot of places across the world. So I'm not surprised about only 14% plan to stay, because there's so much out there. And the fact that people are looking so much for new, such a high percentage on new role, that doesn't surprise me, because there's a lot of moving pieces out there with AI, with new companies that are becoming unicorn in the space of 3 to 5 years, with record levels of investment, with public markets now, rallying. I think there's a lot of choice out there, also than a few years ago. And Jessica, you mentioned an interesting point around longevity and loyalty. I think we're seeing that as well. I've been in recruitment for 22 years, and I think going back 5-6 years, a lot of employers were saying we need to see good tenure on resumes. We need to see 5 or 6 years, per job. But now we don't get that pushback as much. We're fine to send a resume to a client, and that resume demonstrates a year here or 2 years there, and as long as there's a good level of experience gained, and that company scaled and grown, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for some sort of kind of scale up expertise, someone who's automated or driven transformation. I think that stands head and shoulders above everything else right now, who can adapt to that fast moving environment that a lot of us are in within tech.
I mean, we heard it from Pauline, right? She's like, look, I'm looking for someone with skills. Like, have you actually practically done these things, and has it been progressive, right? Versus, oh, I need the traditional, 10 years of experience, etc. So it's just accelerated everything. My prediction is that we're going to start to see accounting salaries like continue that pendulum swing to continue to rise up and up, again, with it being a dying profession and really a talent shortage. If you really look across, like it is a talent shortage. So
yeah, absolutely. Pauline, anything to add to that?
I mean, like I was just thinking about like the question I'm now asking to finance people I'm hiring is like, what have you built? It's not like what have you done? It's like, what have you built with AI? And if I don't have the answer to that, like you can pass. Like I want people ready to live with Claude, just to call it.
Definitely. And that's a nice segue to our next section, which is, AI optimism is up, and it's already changing how obviously finance teams work, as we know. 92% of respondents are either excited or, have mixed kind of feelings about AI. Only 3% worried. 46% excited, 46% mixed feelings, 5% cautious, 3% worried. 91% already using AI to save time. 1 in 5 saving kind of 6 hours per week, which is quite significant. AI is now a daily workflow tool, not an experiment. AI users in kind of 132,000 versus 118,000 euros for non-users, 14%, 14,000 euros annual salary premium. And, we're seeing every CFO mandate that we execute on, and even VP of Finance and controller level roles, they want someone who's used AI for, in a certain capacity. And if you haven't, then you're left behind, and, you're really not going to demonstrate value add. So it's very much so, front and back of every mandate that we hire for. AI is here, and you really need to embrace it. And Pauline, I'm sure at Spendesk they're very much so championing AI. What is the realistic state of AI adoption in finance teams today, and where are you personally seeing real kind of return of investment?
Well, two things about it. First of all, it's exciting. Second of all, it's super exciting. I think that when it comes to my team, I think that I've been pushing for, like, we're using Dust, which is an aggregator, French scale up, super promising in AI agents, and so it's secured with a strict governance rules, AI workspace. And we've pushed for adoption in the team. We've pushed them to build agents, and I'm even putting a hackathon, finance hackathon, just to push the boundaries a bit further in this month. So I think this is time that I grant to my team just to create more value for the company at the end. So I think that I want to automate so many workflows. I think that 6 months ago they were still exploring, and now we are really starting crafting, connection between agents and our database, our ERP, our Spendesk environment, and we are starting to build reports, automated one, and we are literally automating workflows. And when it comes about the Spendesk revolution about AI, it will be about this connectivity that I've been an alpha tester for that for the last 2 months, and now I cannot imagine not questioning and discussing with my data with Claude or whatever agents. So I think that now, will be finally, we need to be super, let's say, with high expectations towards all the vendors we are using in our finance tech stack. So we need to ask for them, what is your AI roadmap? How are you going to help me get the ROI on AI I deserve? We need to be super high standard here, and push our teams to take the most boring tasks of their daily life and try to automate it. And now I think I'm still struggling to get all my data connected in a secured way with the LLMs. But I think it's just the beginning. I also already see ROI in some, answering audit requests that are super boring, super tedious, getting invoices for audit testing, whatever. I can do it now in seconds with Claude. I don't even need to work on that. And so many reports are now live reports and not weekly or monthly reports. It's already an ROI to, get more value to the business and foster decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, interesting point. And we hosted a CFO roundtable the other week, and there was a bit of skepticism, and that's that kind of small percentage we see in this report. But overall, there is a lot of optimism. I think the skepticism boarding comes from the risk and the governance and kind of regulation around AI and how it should be rolled out across companies. Is that something to be concerned about with the rate of growth of these AI tools and how they are absolutely dominating what we do? Is there kind of a real need to make sure that we're doing it in the right way or implementing these systems in the right way?
Yes, implementing in the right way, it means again, secured governance. Don't share your data. I want to connect my HRIS with my LLM, and so far it's a no, okay, because it's not secured enough. So it's okay for some of my billing information because this is in a very a compliant environment, but for others, well, too sensitive. Let's slow down before we we break things. But I think that for finance, anyone having a small appetite in AI, they are tending to work in a more effective and strategic way because they are delegating the craft and the crunch, the VLOOKUPs, etc., to Claude, and they are taking the time back to actually bring more value. In my FP&A team, it's visible. As I'm afraid I don't need to hire new analysts because I'm just buying them, Claude licenses, and we are getting so much faster.
Yeah,
it's impressive.
Very impressive. Jessica, how are organizations thinking about AI readiness? Are they building it into job descriptions, performance frameworks or upskilling budgets, would you say?
Yeah, I think when we hosted this session last year, I think my prediction was just that we were going to see companies really stop talking about AI in theory and start practically embedding it into roles, even roles within finance. I think that was actually the example that we used, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So, I mean, case in point, Pauline mentioning, hey, if you don't have some exposure to AI, then, I may, take you out of my interview process, right? That is a real example of what we're seeing. So we're seeing, across, our clients and customers, and then internally at Deal as well, we're seeing where, we are embedding AI usage, within the actual job posting and description. It's starting to become the pay to play. You need to have these skills, or at least, because I don't think we're quite there yet on like how we can measure that skill.
Mm.
But what we can do is hiring managers and teams are starting to look at, well, what did you actually do? What did you actually build? Give me a practical example. So I think that over time, like that measurement of skill level and competency will start to prevail and come out. So yeah, so we're seeing it as part of the job descriptions, the
Mm.
hiring manager requirements and conversations. We're not necessarily seeing major premiums on the budget for the role. I think it's what I'm seeing are companies are okay taking a step back on the level or the years of experience that someone may have for the role to trade for kind of that will to win. Like, are you naturally curious? Can you pick something up and build something that is scalable? So we are seeing quite a bit of that. And then to Pauline's point, like I'm seeing this all over. It's the kind of AI hackathons. I mean, we're doing the same internally at Deal, even within the total rewards function. Like we're using it a ton in our day to day on, when you think of that low hanging fruit or ticky tacky things like invoicing,
Mm.
expense payouts, reconcile. Like I just sent a note to 2,000 people that haven't accepted their equity grants in ShareWorks, right? And I did it in 3 minutes before I joined this call, right? So, right? So, I think I was sharing with Dav and Pauline, I did my entire comp committee materials in Claude. We have a secure version, so it is a little easier there, but it's things like that are giving a lot of us time back, and that's again starting to become the pay to play. I'm so curious to see how this conversation goes next year when we have the same conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, I think I mentioned earlier that a lot of companies are expecting to hire candidates with AI proficiency, but it's also correct the other way as well. Candidates are interviewing at a business and the business isn't championing AI or hasn't really adopted AI yet.
Yeah.
They're put off by it because they really want to go to a company that's very much so investing in those tools and is upskilling individuals
Mm-hmm.
to embrace those tools. So, I think it's key that we all embrace it, because you will be left behind in that talent race at the end of the day. And so yes, it's in job descriptions, and we're seeing it all the time, but it's also in the kind of value proposition that employers are kind of coming to us with as to why you should join us. You should join us because we are back in front of AI and we've done this and that, and we've got a budget to continue AI development. And that's what we're saying to companies, to really think about. And that's, really going to separate them. It's not just about the salary and the kind of comp piece. It's about, really forward thinking kind of ethos that a company can offer.
Yeah.
Which
And it's sorry to cut you off. It's going to be really interesting, especially everyone in this call to think about, if you're spending, like at Deal, we're giving everyone a Claude license, right? And you've got a certain amount of tokens each month that you can use. That's expensive. And so it'll be curious to see, especially for finance leaders, how you're thinking about budgeting, buying talent or buying the tech, right? To kind of upskill people. And I think that it's very much trending right now, and a lot of articles, but those are conversations that you should be having with your tech team, your HR teams on, hey, if we're spending $3 million a year in, AI licenses, is there a trade-off on headcount expense? And what does that look like? Now, Pauline, I'm sure you're living this,
100%.
right?
100%.
Yeah.
No, it's true. And this is where I think it's not about salaries, but it is about measuring the ROI of all the tokens we are, burning today. I think that in many in CFO conversations that I have, offline or in WhatsApp, everybody has burnt the annual budget of tokens at the end of May. So we need to recalibrate a bit our budget estimates here, our assumptions. But it's super difficult. So I think that today this is between okay, should I jump in this train, or should I just wait and see what is the cost? I think that today there is I think a lot of companies are taking this risk, and I think it's today this is the best way to do it. For sure, there is no open bar. I think the way to get some, not the same level of tokens credit to an accountant and to, let's say, a infrastructure engineer, for instance. But yes, we are getting better at that.
And I would imagine, and this is a big assumption, managing down it's an easier argument to adopt AI. But when you're managing up board level members, who are typically or stereotypically quite tenured, and possibly are still playing catch up with AI, is there a bit of skepticism at that level, at that senior level, or are a lot of people on board? Would you say, Jessica, Pauline?
I think it depends, right? So I used my comp committee materials as an example, and it reminded me that even though we built this great artifact in Claude that gives everything in more real time, I was still asked, can I have a deck? I'm like, oh, I mean, yes, you can have a deck. So, I think that's just some of those, this is the way that we're used to, and in getting over that change hurdle and saying that, hey, there is really good, results that we're getting from this. And it gives you more than what you need in, real time in a deck, right? And so we all know how those conversations go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Pauline, anything to add to that?
No, I think that today, all my board members are nodding when we are saying that we are implementing and testing other solutions. Now I'm looking at my tokens budget, and I think I need to unlock some investments. But for sure, I think back to finance, we need to focus on getting our data connected. We need and to get all the company getting the data connected, like from people to go to market operations to tech, obviously. And today I'm more focused on gaining velocity, in the delivery, rather than making trade-offs, like you were saying, Jessica, between hiring or getting more tokens. I'm more like, what is the velocity I can acquire, how fast I can go with AI. And I think that maybe when we have this same conversation in 1 year, therefore we will be talking about these trade-offs. I think to me it feels a bit early to assess.
Yeah. Agree. I've had leaders joke with me and say, as we're planning our mid-year and our end-of-year budgeting, oh, can we just forego merit increases and just reinvest that back into Claude tokens? And I'm like, we'll talk. We'll talk about it. But yeah.
Absolutely. And the kind of final section I really wanted to touch upon was the rise of the fractional CFO. I think fractional CFOs, as you can see here, and 20% more than permanent peers, 182 euros versus 152,000 of their kind of perm counterparts, and a 30,000 euro premium. Obviously, we've got to consider the benefits piece that potentially fractional individuals miss out on, but still a difference in salary nevertheless. They report lighter workload, more flexibility, greater job satisfaction than permanent counterparts. And typically the client load is around 3 to kind of 4, simultaneous kind of clients as such. Most work with kind of small early stage companies, where a full-time CFO hire isn't just justified. And, from our perspective, we've seen a massive increase, especially in the UK and Europe, for fractional assistants, especially at that Series A, B level, for obvious reasons, because they don't have big budgets and they probably don't need a fully fledged CFO. That said, they're still growing and they need some sort of kind of governance and controls framework, and need someone to kind of sit around the table when it comes to fundraising every so often. So we've seen definite increase of fractional CFO usage versus last year across A and B, and then obviously when they get to C, they tend to bring in someone kind of full time. Pauline, what are you kind of hearing on the ground in terms of the fractional piece? Can you see the kind of, does that, I suppose, do those data sets make sense in terms of the demand more so for fractional CFOs and the kind of pay discrepancy versus the permanent counterparts?
The way I see it is like the fractional CFOs is rising in Europe. I think in the US it's much more mature, but I think that now even the CFO role is perceived like all the roles in the company must get an ROI, and I think that it's more and more accepted than at a certain size. Part-time CFO might be more suitable for to protect sustainable growth, and a full-time it's an investment. So you want the seniority, but you don't need it like five days a week. So I think it's from my perspective, it makes a lot of sense, not only for CFOs, by the way, sometimes it can be for other functions. Thinking about procurement, for instance, like you need procurement at some strategic moments of the year, and it could be interesting also to see some maybe fractional CFOs or fractional procurement managers to rise. I think in this area. And by the way, I'm in a company with a full-time CFO, right? But I think yes, it has been thought through that yes, it's because we are a scale up, we need to grow fast, we need to expand in many geographies. It makes sense. In so many other companies, I think it's good that now our job can also be spread across several entities, and I think it's pretty interesting to work in different sectors at the same time. By the way, pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's not going away. I think, Pauline definitely hit on a lot of really good points there, especially, if you have very seasonal things that that you maybe don't need a full-time headcount for the entire year. Or depending on the maturity of your company, maybe you don't need to bring someone in full time, but maybe somebody that is very experienced, so you're willing to pay a little bit more for that versus holding them on your books full time. A lot of things that I see also, especially at deals, since we're in EOR, is companies don't want to hold that risk of having a person. You've got to look at all of the fully loaded costs that come with that headcount, not just, their base pay, right? Or maybe you want somebody in a specific location. There is excellent talent outside of the major hubs like London, Paris, etc. Maybe you want to hire somebody in, I don't know, Poland or Lesotho. So this allows you to do that, or maybe it gives that flexibility to the person, right? Like we're seeing in the data. So kind of gives you that, you can go and challenge yourself with multiple clients versus just one. So I think maybe we've got a lot of people on this call who are thinking, oh, maybe I can go earn more money and do something on a fractional basis. Who knows?
Yeah, interesting. And there is a lot of anxiety amongst the finance kind of leadership community with AI, with the rise of AI, and how many people do you actually need within finance and accounting now going forward? And obviously there's high levels of dissatisfaction, 55% I think we saw. But from my perspective, I think we've seen, we had our strongest last 3 quarters versus ever before since the start of Xander, and I think that's a reflection that the finance leader position has become even more important now because they're managing a lot more across the organization versus, I've been hiring finance leaders for over 20 years versus even, 5 years ago. And I think, quite a few of our CFO placements have gone on to become CEOs in the last 8 to 9 months. So, I think that's a real positive slant. And Pauline, I'm sure your role has become ever kind of responsible as well, and you're kind of almost probably, I'm sure you've got a COO, but quasi COO, CFO, and everything else.
I feel like, yes, with AI and all the data connected all together, getting like CFOs, kind of a job blurring between like COOs, CFOs. I think like at the end, like these chief value officers I was mentioning, I can see it rising because at the end, why are we here? We are here because like first of all, the board needs to be, to get like another people than the CEO, but like we need to be the best business partner to drive like the value creation and the better decisions internally. With AI, I think you can unlock some, you can unsilos, kind of, it's not super English, but like you can break the silos even a bit more. So maybe getting like maybe a leadership teams that are a bit more, let's say, narrowed, but with more less extensive role for CFOs. And any like, I think finance is a data set among others now. So anyone agile enough to manage financial and non-financial data sets to maximize value creation, coming from operations or data or finance, those are the ones who will, I think, take the role. This is my gut feeling, and this is why I find still full-time CFO an exciting career path.
We heard it here first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hopefully you can still hear me. It's a positive note to end this session. Of course, the CFO is here to stay and has become ever so important to an organization. But yeah, no, really appreciate your insights and expert opinion, Jessica, Pauline, and I'm sure the attendees today have taken on a lot. And from what I understand, the report will be shared, at the end of this session with everyone that attended this call. So do take a read and use it how you wish. But appreciate your attendance wherever you are in the world. And all the best and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.